Community News. You've got 24 pages here. You talked about the costings, you talked about the spendings, but some of the stuff in here, a freeze on immigration, NHS waiting lists down to 0, more police officers. You accuse other parties of broken promises, but isn't this really a list of unrealistic promises, a wish list rather than a serious plan? Aren't you doing what you accuse others of, which is chucking out a whole lot of things that sound popular in the hope you get votes that you never plan to deliver on?
It is a promise. This is what we're going to campaign for over the course of the next 5 years. These are the principles, these are the issues. Richard talked about the way we can pay for things, but this is what we're going to campaign for. I said at the very start, we are not going to be in government this time round. But we are going to provide a voice of opposition, and this outlines where we're going to challenge Labour. On many of these things that we're discussing in this document, I mean, Labour don't even want to talk about these issues tonight. We've laid out very clearly where we stand, philosophically, ideologically, on a number of things, and this is what we're going to fight for. So no, I see no inconsistency with that whatsoever. It's very different, isn't it, to promising you reduced net migration to tens of thousands a year in consecutive manifestos, and then not even trying to achieve it.
Chris Hope.
Chris Hope, GB News. Two quick questions. You're here to target Labour, you're here in Merthyr Tydfil, but why are your policies aimed at the Tory voters? Describe for us a typical Reform voter. And to Richard Tice, on page 23, it says that you'll bring up tax to 40% of GDP more than Labour. Why is that? Or is that, am I reading that wrong?
Well, hang on a second. I mean, you talk about Reform voters or Reform members. A very large number of Reform members are former members of the Labour Party, and they've been on that journey that millions did in this country, you know, from sort of 2010 on to now. I guess Lee Anderson being perhaps a very, very good example of that. And I think actually what we're talking about here in terms of giving those at the lowest end of the income scale, or those trapped on benefits, we're trying to find some answers, some solutions, some things we can campaign for to try and make lives absolutely the best they can be for those at the bottom of the spectrum. Now, whether you regard that, Chris, as being a Labour policy or a Tory policy, I don't know. We just take the view that it's a right policy, it's the correct policy. I actually think what's interesting is immigration, the subject, always considered to be a right of centre debate. Across Europe, increasingly, it's something that parties on the left of politics are talking about as well. So I don't think it's sensible to pigeonhole much of what's in there as being Labour or Conservative, but I do believe, as Richard said, there's an awful lot of common sense. And these are the things we're going to campaign for, and I think they're going to gain widespread, considerable public support.
Thank you. Just on your second point, Chris, yes, there's a simple expression here, which is that smart tax cuts that create growth pay for themselves over and over and over. And if we get higher growth, then guess what? You get higher tax revenues. And the compounding effect of that over a 5 to 10 to 15-year period is absolutely massive. And there's not enough discussion in this country about the benefits of growth. And there's no idea from the mainstream parties about that. So what we put in there is an estimate. If you grow the economy by an extra 1 to 1.5%, then the extra revenues, tax revenues, would be about 10 billion. Look, that's the reality. We've got to talk about growth and the benefits. Who's next? Sam Coates.
Sam Coates, Sky News. Mr Farage, in your contract, you're proposing to spend an extra £141 billion every year. That's about 30 times the amount that Labour are going to spend, 10 times the amount the Tories, 3 times the amount that Liz Truss promised to spend. You did say that you weren't going to win the next election, but the scale of this is deeply unserious, isn't it?
That's right, it's radical, it's fresh thinking, it's outside the box. It's not what you're going to get for the current Labour and Conservative parties, who are virtually indistinguishable, frankly, from each other. Is this radical fresh thinking on economics? Yes. Is it radical fresh thinking on constitutional change? Yes. Is it very radical change on the way our education system is currently bringing up our young children? Yes. Britain is broken. Britain needs reform. That's what we're here for. That's what we're trying to do. And Richard has also suggested some very interesting radical changes to pay for it. We're unashamedly radical. We want change. This isn't working, and nobody has got political arguments in this election. It's basically more of the same. It is going to be a Labour government. We all know that. I said that 2 weeks ago when I came back, when Richard passed me the ball or the hand grenade that was fizzing or whatever it was. And I said that 2 weeks ago, that Labour are going to win. This is about who the opposition is going to be. And what we're talking about is we're going to fight for over the course of the next 5 years. So, no, there's no rowing back from me, no apologies from me on this whatsoever. This would represent a fundamental transformational change within the British economy.
But to be clear for those who are watching on the live stream, Sam, yes, there's some series of spendings, costs, but we also outline all of the savings that I've just touched on there. So it's very important that you look at both sides of the coin. As Nigel says, it's not working. People are getting poorer. Unless we change course, we are heading towards disaster. That's the point. Who's next? Yes.
Hi, Amico from Politico. I've got a question for Mr. Farage. One of the main criticisms of you is that it's all well and good being a kind of protest voice, because it's not that hard with governance, and even leading the opposition, like you're saying you want to do, is actually a much more complex thing. It requires delicate management, it requires negotiation and compromise. Although you might not like their decisions, Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer, they both have experience running enormous, complex organisations that require some of that compromise and negotiation. What do you say to people who might like you and think that you talk a lot of sense, but don't believe that you've got the attitude or the skill for the compromise and management required to be an actual opposition leader or even PM rather than just a protester?
All right, well look, I think, we all have our personalities. Yes, of course, I'm fairly decisive. I have an opinion. Doesn't mean I don't listen, doesn't mean I don't change my mind, doesn't mean I don't respect others, doesn't mean I can't work as part of a team. And many people I work with in politics, I've worked with for many, many years. So I understand the point about compromise. But equally, you have to have a vision. You have to have a goal. And I've had that. I mean, this time 30 years ago, I was campaigning in the Eastleigh by-election in Hampshire, all right? And I did it, not because I wanted a career, far from it. In fact, in the end, I gave up a good career because I wanted to pursue goals. I wanted to pursue things that I believed in. And I come out of retirement to do this for a similar reason, albeit it's not, as some would see it, the narrower point of self-government outside the European Union, well, I never believed it was, but some saw it that way. This is about the way in which the country is run, the way in which the country is managed. So yes, I can compromise if I need to. But I also think I've had some long-term views of politics, of society, that have been right. So yes, I'm very confident. I'm very confident in what I say and what I believe in. And I think to give leadership, you actually need to have that.
I'll take a couple more. Yes, the lady there.
Hi, Catherine Jones from S4C. You're here today in one of Wales' most deprived areas. Are you giving people here hope at this election, or is it just a list of things to hate, from immigration to devolution?
That question is very closely linked to the previous question in this sense. This is not a protest document. This is not a protest vote. And it's been a common misconception with all the campaigns that I've run over the years. I remember sort of in 2011, 12, 13, every by-election we'd hear, well, that was a shock result for UKIP. The protest vote is growing. It was always a protest vote, as people are suggesting this is a protest vote. When you actually poll people that voted for parties I led back then or now, when you poll them and ask them, is it a protest vote? They say, no, it's not a protest vote. We believe in what they're saying. We think they've got positive policy solutions for the future. So yes, of course, we're in an area that has done relatively badly compared to many others, and we genuinely believe the biggest beneficiaries of the ideas we're outlining here will be people, and I repeat the point, trapped on benefits, who don't want to be there, or on low incomes, or with energy bills that they're struggling to pay. There is a lot more here, far more here, for those at the lowest end of the income scale than there is for anybody else. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Gabrielle Nolan from Sky News. You say you want to find £50 billion of public sector waste every year. That's an enormous figure. Where exactly do you plan to find those savings? And is this just code for cuts to public services?
Well, cuts to public sector, I mean, frankly, they're never in the office anyway, are they? I mean, it's work from home, popping to Whitehall a couple of days a week. No, I mean, Richard's made the point at length, eloquently earlier. If you're running a company and things are tight, you say to your managers and middle managers, right, I'm sorry, this is the way it is. You've got to cut £5 and 100. In fact, in tough times, it might be £10 and 100, or £20 and 100. And you have to find a way of doing that without affecting the product that we're selling to the public. This is not unrealistic in any way at all. And the sheer bloating, the bloating of the quangos, the bloating of the civil service that has taken place even since, or let alone since 2016, since 2019, is just astonishing. And that's what we've had with the Conservative government. We've had big government, we've had restriction of individual choices, we've had high taxation, record immigration, and all we're going to get with Labour is more of the same. So, yeah, some of these things we're proposing are tough, but look, the accumulated national debt is now 2.7 trillion. It was just under 1 trillion when the Tories came to power. We simply cannot go on like this. We're skint. I mean, who else would dare say that in this campaign? We're skint. We're in real trouble. And the nonsense of economic argument we hear from Rachel Reeves and Jeremy Hunt never acknowledges the fact that both of them are expected to be in deficit next year by yet another £100 billion. So we're saying, let's face reality. We have to have a slimmed down public sector. We have to do that whilst maintaining services.
Last question, ITV. And then we've got some one-on-ones, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Harry Horton, ITV News. You're proposing in this contract tax cuts, £88 billion worth, on a scale that might even cause Liz Truss to raise her eyebrows. And the savings that you say will pay for these are questionable. Isn't this exactly the sort of economic policy that would cause financial markets to freak out?
No, I don't think it is, and to compare it to Liz Truss is wrong. Yes, Liz Truss wanted to talk about growth, but nowhere in her proposal could we see cuts on the one hand to compensate for the giveaways on tax. That was the fundamental mistake that Kwasi Kwarteng made with that budget. We're not making that. And sure, you can question our numbers, but actually I think, in particular, what Richard has brilliantly illustrated, with the interest being paid to the banks not being my favourite set of organisations, I can tell you. And this is something that is now picking up more and more economic approval, former deputy governors of the Bank of England and others saying Richard's on the right track with this. So no, and in terms of financial markets, well, of course, the French bond market is very interesting this morning if you look at it. Look, I think an idea that says we want to regenerate the British economy, an idea that says we want to bring back manufacturing to our economy, an idea that says we have to accept the fact, whatever our view, we'll be using oil and gas until 2050, so why not produce our own in this country rather than importing it? I think all of these things actually will be quite bullish for financial markets, even if there was initially a bit of a political shock. But look, let's be realistic. I repeat the point. We ain't going to win this election. This is our first big election. But we are well on our way, if you believe the MRP polls, etc. at the weekend, we're well on our way to establishing, that bridgehead in the House of Commons. And those MPs that we do elect will actually have on their shoulders the hopes and optimism of many, 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 many millions of people. Be in no doubt, this campaign is going well. There is momentum out there. You only have to look at things like social media numbers to realise how well we're doing with a budget that's a fraction of the others. And that's because we've got, we may be, compared to Labour and Conservative right now, we may well be a relatively small party, but we've got a very, very big message.
Thank you very much, everybody. We're going to do some one-on-ones and appreciate your